There's a specific kind of evening that leads someone here. Not quite ready to sleep, but not quite up for anything that requires real attention either. The kind of night where you want something in your ears, a voice, some information, a story that moves slowly enough that you can follow it or not, and it doesn't particularly matter which. And honestly, that's exactly what this is. So welcome. If you're new here, no introductions needed, just get comfortable. Tonight we're doing something a bit self-indulgent, and I mean that in the best possible way. We're going to take a slow, unhurried walk through everything that's been announced and confirmed so far about the second season of Dexter, Resurrection. No urgency, no countdown clock, no ranked lists of things you absolutely have to know before it airs. Just the information, laid out at a pace that's kind to you. If you fall asleep somewhere in the middle, that's fine. That's actually the whole point. These sections are self-contained, so wherever you drift off, you won't miss a payoff. There isn't one. This is just a long, comfortable conversation about a show that a lot of people have feelings about. And there are reasons to have feelings about it. Dexter has been on television in one form or another since October 2006. That's almost 20 years of the same character, the same inner monologue, the same particular ritual of wrapping someone in plastic on a table covered with photographs. It's a strange thing to have persisted this long, and the fact that people are still genuinely excited about a second season of its latest chapter says something about what the franchise managed to pull off when it brought Dexter back to screens in the summer of 2025. We'll get into all of it. The new cast, which is frankly quite exciting. The production timeline, the 20th anniversary angle, which is a legitimately interesting piece of context. The loose ends season 1 left dangling, the creative team, the platform situation, the broad shape of what season 2 is supposed to be about, including the phrase midlife crisis, which I promise we will spend some time sitting with because it earns it. If you want to subscribe before we get going, now would be a good moment. It helps more than people realize. But there's no pressure. We're already here. Right, let's take this slowly. Picture Dexter Morgan on a stolen yacht, drifting past the Statue of Liberty at night, dropping black garbage bags over the railing into the harbor. That image tells you most of what you need to know about season 1. Same show, different skyline. The season ended on September 5th, 2025, with an episode called "And Justice for All." At the start of the finale, Dexter is locked inside a vault, a kind of serial killer trophy room owned by the season's main antagonist, Leon Prater, played by Peter Dinklage. Prater is a billionaire venture capitalist who privately collects memorabilia from real-life murderers, and he's decided to leave Dexter in there to die slowly. The vault is airtight, there's no obvious way out, and the party happening upstairs, a black tie gala themed around the very killers whose files are surrounding Dexter, is not the kind of crowd that's going to notice one man going missing. What gets Dexter out is AHN Hell Batistu's phone. Batista, the returning character from the original series played by David Zayas, was shot by Prater earlier that episode. A death that hits hard if you spent any time with the original show. Dexter finds the phone, reaches Harrison, who sneaks into the gala and cracks the vault using a code tied to the killer of Prater's own parents. There's a certain symmetry to that. Dexter kills Prater on an improvised kill table, pays a quiet, sad tribute to Batistu. "You were a good cop and an even better man." Then triggers the vault alarm so police will find Batistu's body and the evidence implicating Prater. Before he leaves, he helps himself to a duffel bag full of files from Prater's collection. Files on other killers, the Midnight Mangler, the Jaw Splitter, the Yonkers Slayer, someone called Rapunzel. A hit list for next season, basically. Charlie, Uma Thurman's character, Prater's fixer and enforcer, had already left by this point. She found out Prater had a file on her too, decided that was enough, and got out of the city with her mother. Harrison got his quiet moment with Gigi. Dexter floated off on the yacht, and somewhere in those files was a name, Don Frampt, the New York Ripper, someone whose story wasn't finished. That detail matters a great deal more now than it did in September. It's worth stepping back for a moment because the context around Season 1 matters quite a bit for understanding why Season 2 feels like a genuine event rather than just another continuation. The Dexter franchise has had a complicated few years. The original series ended in 2013 with a finale that was, to put it generously, not well received. Dexter driving his boat into a hurricane and reappearing as a lumberjack in Oregon is still brought up as a punchline in conversations about bad endings. That shadow followed the franchise for nearly a decade. New Blood in 2021 was a genuine attempt at rehabilitation. It succeeded in some ways. Harrison's storyline was compelling, the Iron Lake setting was distinctive, and Michael C. Hall clearly had more to work with than he did in the later original seasons. Then it ended with Harrison shooting Dexter, which was bold and divisive, and managed to generate its own separate argument about whether it was satisfying or just bleak. Original Sin arrived in late 2024 as a prequel set in 1991 Miami, following a young Dexter coming into himself. It actually broke records on its premiere weekend, the most streamed Showtime premiere in history at the time, pulling in over 2.1 million viewers globally on opening weekend, which made what happened next a bit surprising. It was canceled in August 2025, barely 6 months after airing. The Paramount Skydance merger had just gone through, and the new ownership wanted to consolidate the franchise around one version of Dexter, specifically the one with Michael C. Hall actually in the lead. So by the time Resurrection landed in July 2025, it needed to do something the franchise hadn't managed cleanly since Season 4. Remind everyone why they liked this show. And from what the reception suggested, it did. The reviews were warmer. The discourse was more enthusiastic. The renewal came in 5 weeks. That's the position Resurrection Season 2 is inheriting. Not a show fighting for its survival, but one that has fairly recently earned some goodwill back. The finale aired on September 5th. The renewal was confirmed on October 8th. That's 33 days. By streaming television standards, that's almost instantaneous. Paramount Plus and Showtime made the announcement official on October 8th, 2025, and the news landed with considerably more enthusiasm than most renewal announcements manage. The Instagram post announcing it pulled in over 10 million views, which is a number that tells you something useful about where this fan base is right now. There are a lot of people paying attention. What made the announcement slightly more complicated and interesting was that it came alongside the confirmation that Original Sin would not be getting a second season. The two pieces of news arrived in close proximity, and the messaging around them was fairly transparent. Paramount, having just completed its merger with Skydance, wanted to focus its Dexter resources on the version starring Michael C. Hall, not the prequel, not alternate timelines. The main character in the present, played by the man who has played him since 2006. That's a meaningful decision, and it shapes what Resurrection Season 2 is. It's not sharing space with a parallel series anymore. It is the Dexter franchise, full stop. The writer's room opened up that same month. Clyde Phillips, who has been running the show since New Blood, was already thinking about where Season 2 goes. The pace at which things moved from renewal to production start suggests they had at least the broad shape of the story before the official announcement came through. That's probably how it should work, but it's not always how it does. What the October 8 date also marks is the beginning of a fairly compressed development to production window. Renewal in October 2025, production starting April 2026, premiere targeted for October 2026. That's 12 months from green light to screen. For a franchise that spent years struggling to find its footing again, that pace says something. Clyde Phillips gave an interview around the time of the Season 2 announcement, and one thing he said is worth sitting with. He talked about how Season 1 started filming in January 2025 and aired in July 2025, a roughly 6-month window from start of production to premiere. That's not unusual, he said, and we're going to do it again. For a streaming television drama in 2025, that is actually unusual. Most shows now take somewhere between 18 months and 3 years between seasons. The gap between New Blood and Resurrection was over 3 years. The gap between Original Sin's development starting and its premiere was about 9 months, which was considered fast. Phillips is describing a production rhythm that's closer to how television worked in the early 2000s than to how prestige streaming typically operates. Season 2 has a slightly different window. Production starting in April 2026 rather than January, with a target of October 2026. That's still roughly a 6-month pipeline, just offset by a season. The later start means the summer premiere slot isn't available, which is why the autumn target makes sense, rather than being a cause for concern. It's worth comparing this to the wider franchise timeline just for the enjoyment of perspective. New Blood took something like 2 years from initial script development to air date. Original Sin took under a year. Resurrection Season 1 took 6 months. The franchise appears to be getting faster at making itself, which is reassuring in a way that's hard to fully articulate. It suggests confidence. They know what they're making. The original series, for its part, operated annually for 8 consecutive years. There's something almost pleasingly old-fashioned about Resurrection returning to that rhythm. A show that trusts itself enough to come back before the audience has had a chance to entirely forget it was there. Production on Season 2 officially began on April 13, 2026. Director and executive producer Marco Siega posted the announcement on Instagram. A carousel of 3 photos, the clapboard, the crew's on-set chairs, lined up in that particular way film sets always have them, which always looks oddly peaceful for something that's about to involve a lot of organized chaos. And then the third image, which was the deliberate choice, a close-up of a syringe of M99. M99 is the main sedative Dexter uses to subdue his victims. It's been in the show since the beginning. The fact that Siega chose to include it as the punctuation mark on the production start post tells you something about the team's awareness of the audience. They know what people are here for. The caption was simple. Off we go. There was also a video released around the same time of Hall on set, with James Remar, Dexter and the ghost of Harry together again. It was brief, promotional, the kind of thing that exists to confirm that yes, this is happening. The people you want to see are there. But there's something quietly nice about seeing those two specifically in the first confirmed footage from production. Their dynamic is the emotional through line of the revival series in a way that perhaps even the Harrison relationship hasn't fully matched yet. Scott Reynolds is returning as a core writer. Marco Siega is back directing. Clyde Phillips is still running the show. The creative team has been remarkably consistent across New Blood, Original Sin, and both seasons of Resurrection. That kind of continuity tends to matter. It's not just about individual talent. It's about people who've developed a shared grammar for the material. The production start on April 13th also comes with a new location, which is worth a few minutes of its own. Dexter. Resurrection. Season 2 will be the first television production to lease studio space at Sunset Pier 94 Studios, a brand new facility in New York City that's part of the city's ongoing, fairly serious effort to attract major productions to stay and build in the 5 boroughs rather than decamping to more affordable locations. There's something a little poetic about a show that just featured the 5-borough killer as one of its new villains, being the first tenant at a studio that physically plants its flag in New York. I'm probably reading too much into that, but it's a fun detail. Being the first production into a new facility comes with an unusual mixture of advantages and unknowns. On one hand, everything is new. The equipment, the infrastructure, the technology hasn't been worn down by years of other productions cycling through. On the other hand, you're working out the kinks in real time, and the crew are figuring out a new space while also trying to make a television show on a reasonably tight schedule. Whether that creates any visible texture in the final product is impossible to say from the outside, but it's an interesting circumstance. The show will continue filming on location across New York City, which has been one of the more successful aspects of Season 1. The city has a scale and a density that Miami never quite had, and it gives Dexter's world a feeling of genuine anonymity. The sense that one more person doing strange things in the middle of the night is simply not going to be noticed. New York absorbs that kind of activity in a way that a smaller city doesn't. Season 2 is set in June 2026, more on that specific detail later. So we're talking about New York in summer, which is a different visual and atmospheric proposition than the February and March setting of Season 1. Longer days, different light, a city that feels, if anything, even more populated and harder to hide in. That should be interesting. October 1st, 2006. That's the date the original Dexter pilot aired on Showtime, a Sunday evening. The show's first scene, Dexter driving through Miami at night, voiceover already running, watching the city with that particular flatness, landed in a television landscape that was, at the time, genuinely uncertain whether it could sustain a serial killer as a protagonist. It turned out it could, quite comfortably in fact. Clyde Phillips has confirmed that the target for Season 2's premiere is October 2026. No official date has been locked, and Paramount hasn't made a formal announcement as of now. But October is the stated goal, and given that production started in April with a 6-month pipeline, the timing maps cleanly. If it hits that window, Season 2 will premiere during the same calendar month as the original pilot, 20 years later. Whether that's intentional or a convenient coincidence probably depends on who you ask, but it's been noted. Dexter Daily, which is one of the better fan-adjacent news sites covering the franchise, picked up on it when the timeline was confirmed. The framing has started appearing in coverage. This isn't just Season 2, it's the anniversary season. There's something genuinely pleasing about that if it lands on schedule. 20 years is an unusual milestone for a character who started as a somewhat pulpy cable drama about a bloodspatter analyst who moonlights as a vigilante killer. The show accumulated a lot of cultural weight along the way. The opening credits sequence, Michael C. Hall's particular still, watchful performance, that score. It became part of a specific era of television that people returned to with a kind of fond, complicated feeling. And now, in October 2026, if everything goes to plan, it comes back again, in a new city, with Brian Cox. At some point during the development announcements, an official Season 2 description was released. It's worth reading slowly because it's doing several things at once. The second season of Dexter. Resurrection finds Dexter Morgan caught between two killers, one notorious and the other terrorizing New York in ways no one ever anticipated, all while battling his greatest enemy yet, a midlife crisis. Let's take that apart in order. Two killers. We now know who they are. Brian Cox as Don Frampt, the New York Ripper, and Dan Stevens as Owen Stark, the Five-Borough Killer. Two very different criminal archetypes, operating in the same city at the same time as Dexter. The description calling one of them notorious and the other one the source of unanticipated terror is a useful distinction. The Ripper is a figure with history and weight. The Five-Borough Killer is a present, active, unpredictable threat, all while battling his greatest enemy yet, a midlife crisis. I want to sit with that sentence for a moment. Dexter Morgan has fought serial killers, crocodile hunters, mob enforcers, FBI agents, his own biological brother, a man who encased himself in concrete to survive hurricanes, and his own son. His greatest enemy yet, a midlife crisis. I don't say this as a criticism. I think it's actually a genuinely interesting creative choice. After everything external has been thrown at this character, the suggestion that the real threat for Season 2 is internal reckoning is a meaningful escalation in a way that adding a third villain wouldn't be. It's acknowledging that Dexter is in his late 50s or early 60s, that he has been running and hiding and killing for decades, and that there's a version of the story where confronting that is harder than anything else he's faced. The description is 10 words of plot setup and 6 words of character study. The 6 words are doing the heavier lifting. The announcement landed on April 26 via Variety. Brian Cox has joined Dexter Resurrection Season 2 as Don Frampt, the serial killer known as the New York Ripper. Take a second with that casting. Brian Cox, Logan Roy, the original Hannibal Lecter in Michael Mann's 1986 film Manhunter, years before Anthony Hopkins made the role iconic. A 2-time Emmy winner. One of those actors who brings a particular kind of weight to a room just by being in it. Not because he shouts or dominates scenes, but because there's a quality in how he occupies space that makes everything around him recalibrate slightly. The character, Don Frampt, is described as an inactive serial killer. His New York Ripper murders were long ago. That's the language in the official character description. He's not actively killing anymore in the traditional sense. Instead, he uses his notoriety to taunt the survivors of his spree. He's still very much in the game, just playing a different and more psychological version of it. Not the predator stalking new victims, but the shadow hanging over the ones who escaped. Some fans, when the announcement came through, expressed mild frustration that the actor's identity was revealed this early. There's a reasonable argument for that. Season 1 maintained the New York Ripper as a pure mystery until the very end, and there's a certain pleasure in not knowing. But the counter-argument is that Brian Cox's involvement is a casting announcement that generates its own kind of attention, and from a marketing standpoint, sitting on that name seems unlikely. What's interesting about the character being retired but taunting is that it sets up a different kind of cat-and-mouse dynamic from what Dexter usually does. The Ripper isn't creating new crime scenes to investigate. He's creating psychological disturbance, which is a specifically difficult kind of target for someone whose entire process involves evidence, surveillance, and a kill room. The New York Ripper was never a central presence in Season 1. He was a mystery running alongside the main plot, Detective Wallace's cold case, something she kept circling back to, a thread that didn't connect to the Prater storyline until very late. And even then, the reveal was quiet. It wasn't the kind of finale twist that gets shouted about. It was more like a door that opened onto a hallway that clearly leads somewhere. What Season 1 established, the Ripper's real name is Don Frampt. His killing spree was historical, years ago, presumably decades at this point, given that it's being treated as a cold case. He was never caught. And when Dexter found his file among Prater's collection, it was clear that whatever Don Frampt had done, Prater had found it worthy of archiving alongside some of the most notorious killers in recent American history. That's not a small endorsement. The character's MO in Season 2, as described, is taunting survivors, which means he's not been entirely quiet since the spree ended. He's maintained a presence in the lives of the people he hurt, a shadow predator extending the psychological damage without committing new murders that could land him on any active investigation. It's a sophisticated kind of ongoing threat, and it explains how someone can be both retired and still dangerous. For Detective Wallace, this should be interesting territory. She spent Season 1 building a file on the Ripper without knowing who he was. Now the name exists. It came out of the Prater situation. And the question is how an active investigation into a cold case with a named suspect unfolds. That's a meaningful amount of procedural pressure to run alongside Dexter's own pursuit of the same person. Whether Dexter hunts the Ripper for the usual code-related reasons, or whether the Ripper comes looking for Dexter first, is something we don't know yet. The second villain announcement came not long after Brian Cox. Dan Stevens is joining Season 2 as Owen Stark, also known as the Five-Borough Killer. Where the Ripper is archival and psychological, a figure defined by what he did in the past and how he's prolonged that damage, Owen Stark is the opposite. He's active, present, and public in a specific and unnerving way. The character description says he taunts the police with called-in threats of violence against innocent civilians and follows through on them. He announces the crimes before committing them, then commits them. The 5 boroughs of New York City are apparently his structural framework. Dan Stevens is an interesting choice for this. His career has covered a lot of ground, Matthew Crawley on Downton Abbey being the point of cultural entry for a lot of people, followed by The Guest in 2014, which was a genuinely unnerving performance in a genuinely unsettling film and demonstrated clearly that he could carry something much darker. Legion, the Marvel series, required a kind of fractured charisma that not many actors could sustain. More recently, various film roles. He has the capacity to be charming and slightly wrong simultaneously, which is a combination that tends to work well for this kind of role. The 5-borough killer as a concept plays well against New York as a setting. It's almost a challenge to the city, not hiding in its scale, but using its geography as the organizing principle of the threat. All 5 boroughs, the map as a framework. That's a different energy from a killer who's been quiet for decades, and having both types active in the same season gives the show a lot of texture to work with. Whether Dexter ends up dealing with Stark through the usual means, or whether the 5-borough killer connects somehow to the Ripper storyline, is one of the more interesting open questions heading into production. The franchise has a history with dual threats, and it's worth reflecting on that briefly because the execution has varied quite a bit. Season 1 of Resurrection already gave us something close to this, Prater as the primary threat, Charlie as a secondary and more ambiguous one. Season 6 of the original series paired Travis Marshall with the ghost of Professor Geller, who turned out to be imaginary, which was a structural choice that divided the audience fairly sharply. Season 7 ran the Iazak Sirko storyline alongside other complications without quite knowing where to put its weight. The version of dual villainy that tends to work best historically is when the 2 threats represent different things, not just different crimes, but different aspects of the protagonist's situation. The Ripper and the 5-borough killer are doing that. The Ripper is historical, personal, and psychological, a figure from the past whose crimes continue to exist in the present through the suffering of the people he left behind. He's the kind of villain that forces a character to reckon with the weight of old things. The 5-borough killer is immediate, public, and chaotic. Someone who announces violence and delivers it, who is operating in real time and requires a real-time response. One pulls backward, one pushes forward. That's a reasonably elegant structure, and it fits the midlife crisis framing in the official description. A midlife crisis is, at its core, a person caught between what they've been and what they're becoming. Having villains that literalize that, the ghost of the past, the chaos of the present, is either a deliberately constructed metaphor or a very happy accident. Given that Clyde Phillips has been writing Dexter for 20 years, I'd lean toward deliberate. Joey E. Quinn is back, and not just back, upgraded to series regular. This is, depending on how much time you spent with the original series, quite a significant piece of news. Desmond Harrington joined Dexter in Season 3 as a recurring character and was promoted to series regular for Season 4, staying through the end of the show in 2013. Quinn was a detective at Miami Metro who was, for much of his run, the person most consistently suspicious of Dexter. Not in the way that LaGuerta was. Quinn's suspicion was more instinctive, less methodical, and he never quite assembled the evidence to act on it. He was also a complicated person in his own right, not without moral ambiguity of his own. He appeared briefly in Resurrection Season 1 without any large storyline, which felt like a nod rather than a real return. Season 2 is apparently a proper one. The emotional weight here is considerable. Angel Batista, Kishin Kajin, Quinn's longtime colleague, friend, and one of the more genuinely decent characters in the franchise, is dead. He was shot by Prater in the Season 1 finale, and Dexter was the only person there when it happened. Quinn doesn't know any of this, or if he does, he doesn't know the full version. coming back to New York to whatever investigation follows the Prater situation, knowing that Batista is gone. That's a specific kind of grief to carry into a story that also involves Dexter being present throughout. Quinn has always had the quality of a man who's a few good breaks away from putting something together that he shouldn't. Whether season 2 is where that finally happens, or whether it continues to be deferred, is one of the more interesting pieces of the overall puzzle. There's a steadiness to knowing that the 3 central relationships of season 1 are all continuing into season 2. Michael C. Hall as Dexter, Jack Alcott as Harrison, James Remar as Harry, or rather as the version of Harry that exists only in Dexter's head, which has been a feature of the show since before Harry died on screen in season 6. Hall is in his 20th year with this character, which is a duration that doesn't happen very often in television, and when it does, it tends to mean something about the relationship between the actor and the role. He's an executive producer now as well as the lead, which gives him creative investment beyond performance. Whatever Dexter's midlife crisis actually looks like on screen, Hall has presumably had input into what that means. Jack Alcott's Harrison is in some ways the more open story. His arc across New Blood and season 1 was one of earning a difficult conditional peace, with himself, with his father, with the knowledge of what he comes from. Season 1 ended with him choosing, provisionally, a quieter road. That provisional quality is going to be tested. It's always going to be tested. The show is too interested in the Morgan family pattern for Harrison to simply be allowed to opt out of it. And then James Remar, Harry Morgan, died when Dexter killed him on screen in the 6th season of the original show. He's been a vision ever since, a spectral presence that Dexter converses with, that represents both his moral compass and the origin of the code that shaped him. Remar plays this with a particular kind of patience that suits a character who, in some sense, can't be surprised by anything anymore. He already knows how the story goes. He's just watching to see which version of it unfolds. In a season being described as an internal reckoning, Harry's presence should be doing something interesting. Here's a Dexter tradition that season 2 is quietly breaking. The villains don't come back. It's been a structural feature of the franchise since the beginning. The Ice Truck Killer, Trinity, Lumen, Isaac Sierko, Dr. Vogel, Kurt Caldwell, all of them resolved by the end of their respective seasons, one way or another. Even when someone survived, they rarely returned in any meaningful capacity. The show has generally operated on the assumption that each season closes out its major threats and the next one opens fresh. Uma Thurman, as Charlie, is, as far as anyone can tell, the first substantial exception. Charlie left at the end of season 1 alive and free, and now she's back. The official framing for her return asks a specific question. Without Prater, will she be friend or foe to Dexter Morgan? It's a reasonable question. Charlie's arc in season 1 was one of gradual moral clarification. She started as Prater's enforcer, capable, professional, and not particularly interested in Dexter as anything other than a complication. As the season progressed, the picture of who she actually was became more layered. When she discovered that Prater had a file on her too, she made a decision that felt consistent with a person who draws certain lines. She left. She took her mother. She got out. None of that makes her an ally. It just makes her someone whose priorities are her own. Uma Thurman, for her part, brings a quality to this that's hard to manufacture. She received a Best Supporting Actress nomination for Pulp Fiction and an Emmy nomination for her work on Smash. She has presence that doesn't require the script to announce itself. Her returning to this world suggests the writers found something genuinely interesting to do with Charlie, rather than just bringing her back as a familiar face. Season 2 introduces a new precinct into the mix, the NYPD's 27th Homicide Precinct, which is described as distinct from the precinct where Detectives Wallace and Oliva work. And running the 27th is Captain Mixon, played by Bokeem Woodbine. The character description is compact but evocative, a bulldog. A homicide captain who doesn't let things go, doesn't move on from cases because they're inconvenient, doesn't back down when the pressure arrives to look elsewhere. Given that one of the loose threads from Season 1 involves a police commissioner who was photographed with Leon Prater and is presumably motivated to close down any investigation into the billionaire's disappearance, a captain who won't let things go is a structurally interesting addition. Bokeem Woodbine brings a serious range to this. He was quietly one of the best things in Fargo Season 2 as the hitman Mike Milligan, a character with genuine menace and a peculiar kind of charm. He's also been in Spider-Man, Homecoming, various television dramas, and a long list of film work. He has the quality of an actor who elevates the material around him without making a production of it. The interesting structural detail is that the 27th Precinct sits separately from where Wallace and Oliva are working. That means Season 2 potentially has multiple investigative threads running through different institutional frameworks. Wallace's cold case on the Ripper, whatever the 27th is handling, and whatever the ongoing fallout from Prater's situation looks like officially. Multiple eyes on overlapping problems, none of them coordinating, all of them gradually moving toward a center that Dexter is also occupying. That's a lot of moving parts. It's also a reasonably reliable way to build pressure without requiring any single character to carry it all. If there's one casting announcement that seems engineered to complicate Harrison's life in the most specific and layered way possible, it's this one. Nona Parker Johnson is joining Season 2 as Fiona Mixon. Captain Mixon's daughter, who's a training officer in the homicide unit and becomes Harrison's love interest. Let's sit with the architecture of that situation for a moment. Hairy son Morgan, carrying the Morgan family inheritance in ways he's been trying to manage since he found out who his father really is, starts a relationship with a woman whose father runs a murder investigation unit. Not just a cop, not just a detective, a captain. In the precinct that's presumably going to be looking, eventually, in directions that are uncomfortably close to where Dexter and Harrison have been operating. That is a maximally inconvenient situation. And it reads like an intentional construction rather than coincidence, because this show doesn't leave that kind of structural irony on the table by accident. Harrison's Season 1 ending was cautiously hopeful. Gigi was there, things were tentatively okay. He'd helped his father one last time and seemed to be choosing something quieter. Season 2's setup suggests that Quiet Road is going to become considerably more complicated. The question of whether Harrison can build a normal life, or any version of a life that doesn't eventually require the same choices Dexter has always made, is one of the franchise's live questions, and Fiona Mixon is the pressure test for the next chapter of it. Nona Parker Johnson is a rising name in American television. This is a significant role, and the character seems built for longevity rather than being a single-season element. Whether she becomes a recurring presence beyond Season 2 is entirely speculation at this point, but the construction of the character suggests the writers are thinking beyond the season. That situation with Fiona aside, Harrison's broader arc heading into Season 2 deserves its own space. New Blood answered the underlying question in the starkest possible way. Harrison shot Dexter, which was simultaneously an act of love and an act of violence, and made everything that followed more complicated. Resurrection Season 1 was about the two of them finding, imperfectly, something that looked like a relationship again. It wasn't resolution. It was a working arrangement between people who share a history that doesn't reduce neatly. Dexter Resurrection, Season 1, ended with Harrison choosing to join Dexter as his partner. He helped Dexter one last time, got his relatively peaceful ending with Gigi, and seemed provisionally, tentatively, okay. Now we have a 4-year gap before Season 2 begins, a love interest whose father runs a homicide precinct, and a show that has been explicit about wanting to explore whether the Morgan family pattern is something that can be broken. Jack Alcott has been asked about Harrison's arc in various interviews, and the consistent note is that the character is still working through what he is. Not in a dramatic, crisis every episode way, but in the sustained, uncomfortable way of someone who knows something about themselves that they haven't fully decided what to do with. The dark passenger question, whether Harrison inherited something from Dexter or whether proximity to Dexter was the source, hasn't been answered. Season 2's setup suggests it'll be pressed on. Fiona Mixon is a love interest, a homicide training officer, and daughter of a captain. Something will have to give eventually. The interesting question is, which version of Harrison is there when it does? Here's a detail that came from set photography rather than a press release, which makes it a bit more fun. During filming, a prop newspaper was spotted on set, a daily news, with the date clearly visible. Tuesday, June 16th, 2026. That single prop answered a question that hadn't been officially addressed. When does Season 2 take place? June 2026, which is notable because Season 1 took place in a compressed window of roughly 5 weeks between late February and late March 2022. The gap between Season 1 and Season 2, in terms of in-universe time, is approximately 4 years. That's the biggest jump between any 2 consecutive seasons in the entire franchise. For comparison, the original series generally moved forward by roughly a year between seasons, tracking something close to real time. New Blood jumped about a decade from the original finale. Resurrection Season 1 appeared to follow New Blood fairly directly. Now we're jumping 4 years into whatever Dexter and Harrison's lives have become since the Prater situation resolved. 4 years is enough time for a lot to change. Enough for Harrison to have built something that looks like a normal life, or tried to. Enough for the Prater investigation's aftermath to have either settled or deepened. Enough for Don Frampt, the New York Ripper, to have been doing whatever he does in the background for another 4 years since his file was first discovered. It also means the show is now definitionally set in the near future relative to its production. Filming in spring 2026 to portray a story set in June 2026. There's something mildly pleasingly recursive about that, even if it doesn't have any practical impact on the storytelling. The June setting means summer in New York, longer light, more people on the streets, harder to disappear into. Season 1 closed out its main threat cleanly. Prater is dead. But it left a fairly interesting trail of unresolved things behind it, and Season 2 is inheriting all of them. The most immediately obvious is Commissioner Franklin McNamara. Near the end of the finale, Dexter found a photograph in Prater's collection, the commissioner standing with Prater in front of the private charter named the Getaway. That's a connection between the NYPD's highest office and a man who has now disappeared, and whose trophy room of serial killer memorabilia has been discovered by police. McNamara, based on everything Season 1 established, has been quietly preventing investigations into Prater from going too far. That cover-up is now dealing with the full consequences of the vault being found. Charlie and her mother left the city. Where they went isn't stated. That thread is deliberately open. Detective Wallace spent the entire season building a file on the New York Ripper. She now has a name, Don Frampt. But what that means for the investigation is entirely unclear. Cold cases with newly named suspects don't resolve simply. They generate a different kind of procedural pressure. The files Dexter took with him are also loose ends in a different sense. Not immediate threats, but future ones he's chosen to keep. The Midnight Mangler, the Jaw Splitter, the Yonker Slayer, Rapunzel. Each of those names represents a case that Prater had assembled, which presumably means each of them is real and active enough that Prater found them worth filing. And then there's the question of Gigi Adersteinan's Harrison's Season 1 love interest, and whether the 4-year gap means that relationship simply ended quietly or whether it left something that matters. All of these threads are available. Season 2 doesn't have to use them all, but the fact that they exist gives the writers options. There's something that slightly tickles me about the closing image of Season 1. Dexter on a stolen yacht, the Statue of Liberty in the background, opening a duffel bag to check what he's brought with him from Prater's collection. 4 files, 4 names. The Midnight Mangler, the Jaw Splitter, the Yonkers Slayer, Rapunzel. As a list, it has a particular texture. The first 3 feel like police procedural nicknames, the kind of thing that gets assigned to a case when a killer's actual identity isn't known yet, often derived from method or location. The Midnight Mangler is probably nocturnal. The Jaw Splitter is fairly self-explanatory, unfortunately. The Yonkers Slayer ties the crime to a place, and then Rapunzel, which is doing something quite different. Rapunzel is a fairy tale, the woman in the tower, the impossible hair, the prince who climbs up. As a criminal nickname, it implies something about the method or presentation that evoked the imagery strongly enough for someone to reach for a folk tale instead of a descriptor. That's a more complex kind of mind at work, either in the killer or in whoever named them. The show may not use all 4 of these in Season 2. Prater's vault contained more files than just those. These were the ones Dexter specifically chose to take with him, which implies his own curation. They're targets he's selected for future attention. Whether any of them surface in Season 2 as active storylines or whether some are seeded for later is an open question. But as a device, the hit list is clean and useful. It gives Dexter a purpose in New York that doesn't require an explanation each time, and it promises that the world of killers the show has built isn't closing down with Prater's death. If anything, it's expanding. Detective Claudette Wallace and Detective Melvin Oliva are both confirmed returning for Season 2. Good, they were one of the better things about Season 1's procedural side. Wallace, played by Kadia Saraf, spent Season 1 working the New York Ripper case with a methodical persistence that felt true to how cold case investigators actually operate. Not with grand leaps, but with an accumulation of detail and a refusal to accept that the absence of obvious leads means there are no leads at all. She now has a name, Dawn Frampt. That changes the shape of her investigation in ways that are hard to predict until you see the episode, but it almost certainly makes it more active, more risky, and more likely to intersect with what Dexter is doing. Dominic Fumusa as Oliva brought a practical, grounded energy to Season 1, the partner who keeps things moving without taking over. The chemistry between the two felt earned rather than constructed, which matters more than it's sometimes credited for in procedural dramas. One thing worth noting is that Wallace and Oliva work at a different precinct from the newly introduced Captain Mixon and Fiona Mixon, who are at the 27th. Multiple investigative threads running through different institutional frameworks means information sharing isn't automatic. People will know things that other people don't know yet. That kind of structural delay tends to create useful narrative pressure without requiring anyone to behave implausibly. They're just working in different rooms with different pieces. It's also worth sitting with what Wallace knows coming into Season 2. She's been investigating the Ripper for what appears to be years. She now has a name. And somewhere in the back of her mind, there's the question of how that name surfaced. Through Prater's files, through a situation that has already generated more questions than answers. Blessing Kamara, Harrison's landlord in Season 1, played by Ntare Guma Mbaho Mwine, occupied an interesting and not entirely resolved space in the first season. He was consistently present, consistently watching, and consistently difficult to read. The show seemed interested in keeping the nature of his knowledge ambiguous. By the end, he hadn't been revealed as anything obviously threatening, but neither had he been fully cleared. He's confirmed returning for Season 2. Given the 4-year gap, whatever Blessing's relationship is with the people around him will have evolved in ways the show will have to account for. The wider question of which other Season 1 supporting characters come back is still being sorted. Emilia Suarez as Elsa Rivera, Harrison's friend, hasn't been officially announced either way. The same goes for Emily C. Kimball as Gigi, Harrison's Season 1 love interest. Given that Fiona Mixon is being established as his Season 2 love interest, the implication is that the Gigi relationship either ended in those 4 intervening years or will be addressed briefly before moving on. There's a pattern in Revival era, Dexter the show building a fairly populated supporting world each season and then allowing some of it to naturally recede before the next season's needs reshape the ensemble. Season 1 brought in a considerable number of new characters, and not all of them will have equal space in Season 2. That's not a failing, it's just how serialized storytelling manages its cast across seasons, especially with 4 years of in-universe time to absorb. What tends to carry over are the characters who either have unresolved narratives or who have been constructed in ways that serve multiple possible future storylines. Blessing, given his ambiguity, fits at least one of those criteria. One of the things that's easy to take for granted with Resurrection, but is actually worth acknowledging, is the creative continuity behind the camera. Clyde Phillips has been the showrunner of this franchise in its best periods. He ran Seasons 1 through 4 of the original series, universally the most acclaimed run, culminating in the Trinity killer season, which is still cited as the show's peak. He left after Season 4, and the general consensus is that the show lost something significant when he did. Seasons 5 through 8 had their moments but never quite recaptured that tone. He came back for New Blood, stayed for Original Sin, and has run both seasons of Resurrection. His presence doesn't guarantee quality. Nothing guarantees quality. But it does guarantee a certain consistent relationship with the material. Someone who understands what this character is, what the show has been at its best, and what it's trying to be now. That kind of institutional memory is hard to quantify but easy to notice when it's absent. Marco Siega has been directing and executive producing across the Revival era with a consistency that's equally notable. The visual grammar of Resurrection, the 21.9 aspect ratio, the way New York has been used, feels like a deliberate, authorial choice rather than something arrived at by committee. Scott Reynolds continues as a core writer. This is a collaborative enterprise that appears to have developed a working relationship over enough seasons that they can move fast without losing coherence. The 3-season plan that's been described publicly suggests this team knows where the story is going. That's not always true of television shows. Sometimes the stated plan is optimistic and the actual execution improvises. But the pace at which Season 2 went from renewal to production suggests everyone involved has a reasonably clear picture of what they're making. There's a quote from Marco Siega that came out of an appearance on the Dark Passengers podcast, one of the better fan-adjacent Dexter discussion spaces. That's worth lingering on. He was asked about the plan for multiple seasons and whether there was anything beyond Season 2. His answer, "In my mind, there's a lot beyond it, but that's just in my mind." And then Clyde Phillips jumped in to say they already know the overview for Season 3, and Siega added, "We even know who we're casting." No official Season 3 renewal has been announced. That depends on Season 2's performance. But the fact that the creative team already knows the Season 3 shape and apparently already has casting ideas before Season 2 has even aired is meaningfully different from the usual situation where a second season is made while nervously hoping a third gets ordered. It suggests something more like a planned ending, or at least a planned direction. This matters because one of the things that damaged the original series in its later years was the absence of a clear ending in mind. The show extended past the point of its natural story and arrived at a finale that felt improvised in the worst possible way. New Blood made a specific narrative choice that felt like a conclusion but left the door open. Resurrection is, by the team's own description, a 3-season story with awareness of where it's going. Whether that holds, whether Season 2 gets the viewership to justify Season 3, whether the plan survives contact with the actual execution, none of that can be known yet. But the orientation is encouraging. A show that knows what it wants to say tends to say it better than one that's finding out as it goes. Somewhere in the Dexter universe's development pipeline, there is a spin-off that nobody seems to be talking about much right now. It was announced around the same time as Resurrection, a prequel focused on Arthur Mitchell, the Tri-Nighty killer, set in the 1970s and covering his early murders. This project has no confirmed title, no cast announcement, no production date. It exists as an announcement and not much more. Given what happened to Original Sin, announced, renewed, canceled, all within roughly the same year, the unnamed Trinity spinoff is probably in a holding pattern while the network sees what Resurrection Season 2 does. The premise is interesting on its own terms. John Lithgow's performance as Arthur Mitchell in Season 4 of the original series is widely cited as one of the best villain turns in the franchise's history, possibly the single best. Trinity was specific in a way that the show's antagonists weren't always. A deeply ordinary family man with a deeply extraordinary secret life, and the tension between those two selves was where the performance lived. A 1970s prequel exploring how that version of him came to be before he was caught or even seriously suspected is a legitimately compelling premise. Whether John Lithgow is involved in any capacity, even a voiceover or a brief appearance as older Mitchell, is completely unknown. The 1970s setting implies a different actor would carry the younger version. Who that might be hasn't surfaced. The project's fate probably hinges significantly on how Season 2 of Resurrection lands. If the franchise is in good shape commercially, there's appetite for expansion. If Season 2 underperforms, the calculus changes. For now, it's just a concept that exists somewhere in a development document, waiting to find out if there's a future for it. The Original Sin situation is worth understanding properly, because it reshapes what Resurrection is and what it's carrying. Original Sin premiered in December 2024 as a prequel set in 1991 Miami. Patrick Gibson played the young Dexter, a forensic intern just beginning his transition from ordinary person to active killer under Harry Morgan's guidance. Christian Slater played Harry, Molly Brown played young Deborah. Michael C. Hall returned not as Dexter, but as the inner monologue voiceover, a clever continuity device that connected the prequel to the original character while letting a different actor carry the physical performance. The premiere drew the biggest opening weekend of any Showtime title in the streaming era at over 2.1 million global viewers. That's a significant number. It was treated as evidence that the franchise still had pull. Then Paramount merged with Skydance. New ownership, new priorities. Original Sin had been renewed in April 2025. The announcement was out there, public, official, and then in August 2025, it was canceled. That sequence of events is unusual enough to be worth noting. It wasn't canceled quietly before anyone had invested in it. It was greenlit, renewed publicly, and then pulled. The stated reason was a strategic focus on the version of Dexter featuring Hall in the lead. Whether there were other factors isn't public knowledge. What it means practically, Original Sin's storylines don't get resolved on screen. Characters like young Deborah, young Laguerre, Harry's story as Christian Slater played him. Those threads end where they ended. Some reports have suggested there may be a connection between Original Sin's Gemini killer mystery and future Resurrection storylines, but nothing has been confirmed. The cancellation was real, but the door between the two series may not be entirely closed. A practical note on where this all lives and how you access it. Dexter. Resurrection Season 2 will stream on Paramount Plus with Showtime. Not just Paramount Plus, but the higher tier that includes the Showtime content library. That distinction matters if you're setting up a subscription and want to make sure you're getting the right plan. The original Dexter series left Netflix in the United States in June 2025, which means the entire franchise now lives under one roof on Paramount Plus. There's a certain logic to that consolidation. If you want to do a rewatch in advance of Season 2, everything is in one place. The release model the show has maintained across the revival era is weekly episodes rather than a full season drop. Season 1 of Resurrection premiered on July 11th, 2025, with 2 episodes available immediately on the streaming side, followed by a linear Showtime broadcast on July 13th. After that, it was 1 episode per week. That rhythm should continue for Season 2. The expectation is a 2-episode premiere, then weekly from there. There's something that feels right about a weekly release model for this specific show. Dexter was always a show you watched in real time, where the conversation between episodes was part of the experience. The theories, the speculation, the reactions. A full season drop on a Friday tends to flatten that into a weekend event, and then relative silence. The weekly model keeps the conversation going for months. If the October 2026 target holds, the Season 2 premiere will likely be a streaming release in late September or very early October, with the linear broadcast following a couple of days later. No official date has been confirmed yet, so that's still approximation. But the parameters are fairly clear. A caveat up front, this section is in the speculative column. Some names have appeared in reporting without clear confirmation, and I'll try to be clear about which is which. David Dastmalchian appeared in Season 1 as a guest star. He has a particular quality that makes him memorable regardless of how much screen time he gets. His face does something unusual in roles that require quiet menace or off-kilter energy. Whether he returns for Season 2 hasn't been confirmed. Neil Patrick Harris was also a Season 1 guest, and his status for Season 2 is similarly unclear. He was used in a specific capacity in the first season, and whether that role has any further to go is unknown. Peter Dinklage as Leon Prater is almost certainly done. Prater died on a kill table, was wrapped up, and disposed of in New York Harbor. The show is generally fairly literal about its finality. But Charlie's return has slightly opened the door on the question of whether previously resolved characters could reappear in any form. Flashback, vision, referenced. Probably not in this case. I'm not suggesting it, just noting that the question has been asked. The show has a history of interesting guest castings per season. Season 1 brought in Eric Stonestreet alongside Dinklage and Thurman, which was an ensemble that raised eyebrows in interesting ways. Season 2's confirmed new additions, Brian Cox, Dan Stevens, Bokeem Woodbine, Nona Parker-Johnson, are already a fairly strong set of names. There may well be additional guest announcements that come out as filming progresses, particularly for roles that don't require the actor throughout the full season. Whether those announcements arrive before October or are saved as surprises is impossible to know right now. Let's spend a bit more time with the midlife crisis framing because it's the most interesting piece of the official description. And it's easy to read past it. I use the phrase midlife crisis fairly freely in conversation, usually in reference to someone buying a motorbike or suddenly getting very into road cycling. It means something quite different when applied to a man who has spent 30 years killing people. A midlife crisis, in its most recognizable form, is about confronting the gap between who you thought you'd be and who you actually are. It tends to arrive when the external markers of progress, career, relationships, the forward motion, stop being enough to drown out the internal questions underneath them. Without something new to pursue or achieve, there's just the accumulated weight of having lived and what you actually feel about how you've used that time. For Dexter, the external markers have included avenging his son's discovery of the truth, escaping certain death in Iron Lake, tracking down Harrison in New York, dismantling Leon Prater's operation, and killing Prater. That's a fairly compressed period of purposeful activity. And now, he's on a yacht with a list of future targets and 4 years ahead of him that apparently needed to pass before Season 2 picks up. The question the description seems to be posing is, what does Dexter do with himself in the absence of an immediate consuming threat? He's in his late 50s or early 60s. He has a son who's alive and cautiously okay. He has a list. He has New York. But he also has the weight of everything that's happened. Everyone who's died around him, every relationship he's compromised or ended, every version of a normal life he's declined. The show has always been at its most interesting when it engages with Dexter's interiority rather than just his exterior competence. The midlife crisis angle suggests Season 2 is interested in what's underneath. There's a version of Dexter that doesn't have James Rimmer in it, and it's noticeably lesser. Harry Morgan died on screen in Season 6. Dexter killed him, or rather smothered the real Harry, who was in a hospital bed with a terminal condition, in an act that the show presented as a complicated mercy. But Harry never really left. He became a vision, a projection, an internal voice that Dexter externalizes as a conversational partner. It's a theatrical device, and it works partly because Rimmer understands exactly what Harry's supposed to be at any given moment. Sometimes conscience, sometimes enabler, sometimes the embodiment of a worldview that shaped Dexter in ways Dexter is still reckoning with. In Season 1 of Resurrection, Harry appeared alongside a gallery of other visions. Brian Moiser, Dokes, Mitchell, Prado, old faces from old seasons, summoned by the particular psychological pressure Dexter was under. Dexter saw his dead, essentially. The people his life has been defined by, or has defined. Rimmer's Harry was among them, as a grounding presence in a crowd of accusatory ones. Season 2's midlife crisis framing makes Harry's role potentially more complex. If the season is about Dexter confronting what his life has actually been, about whether the code was a moral framework or a convenient structure that let him avoid thinking too hard about his choices, then Harry, who created the code, who shaped Dexter into what he became, is the natural figure to put pressure on those questions. The ghost of Harry is, in some ways, the ghost of Dexter's justifications. A season that asks hard questions about those justifications should probably have him working fairly hard. There's something worth acknowledging that doesn't require any analysis at all. Just a moment of genuine appreciation for the duration of this thing. The original pilot aired in October 2006. That's 18 years ago, as of when this was written, and approaching 20 by the time Season 2 premieres. For most of the people watching Dexter, Resurrection right now, this show has existed for most of their adult lives, or a significant portion of them. For some, it was there in adolescence. That kind of longitudinal relationship with a piece of fiction is relatively rare and tends to feel different from shorter-term attachments. What the original series built was specific. The opening credits, Dexter's morning routine rendered as a kind of domestic horror, slicing through meat and pressing orange juice and tying a shoelace, everything normal until you couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't, became one of the more imitated title sequences of its era. The score by Rolf Kent used a peculiar cheerfulness to underscore what was actually happening, which was genuinely clever and genuinely uncomfortable in the best way. And then there's Hall's performance, across all of it. The particular stillness of Dexter Morgan, the way the character watches rather than reacts, moves through spaces with a deliberateness that reads as either professional focus or predatory patience, depending on what you know about him, is a performance that's been sustained across 20 years and multiple production contexts without losing its core quality. That doesn't happen often enough to be taken for granted. The October 26 premiere, whenever it lands exactly, will mark 2 decades of that. Some things deserve a quiet moment before you move on. The list of actors who have played the same character across a run this long, across this many production eras, network shifts, and creative restarts, is genuinely short. It's shorter still when you limit it to prestige dramatic roles that have undergone significant tonal and contextual shifts across that time. Hall came to Dexter fresh from 6 Feet Under, where he'd played David Fisher, a character defined by repression, family obligation, and a quietly devastating kind of grief. The jump to Dexter Morgan required something different, a character who was also repressed and defined by his family, but who channeled that into something outwardly functional rather than inwardly crumbling. Hall made the transition cleanly. The watchfulness he brought to David Fisher became something slightly colder and more precise in Dexter. The Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis came during season 4, when the show was at the height of its powers. He continued production through treatment. The fact that season 4 is the most critically acclaimed of the franchise, and that Hall's performance in it is the primary reason for that, means the personal difficulty of that period is permanently attached to the creative achievement. That's a particular kind of thing to carry. He won the Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Drama Series in 2010. The combination of the award, the illness, and the show's peak all arriving in the same period gave him a specific cultural prominence that he's carried without making much of. The executive producer credit he holds now on Resurrection means he has investment in the direction of the character beyond what any actor usually has. Whatever the midlife crisis storyline is, there's a reasonable chance Hall was involved in shaping it. That's worth knowing. There's a particular pleasure in zooming all the way out and looking at the whole thing at once, not analytically, just as a panorama. The original series ran from October 2006 to September 2013. 8 seasons, 96 episodes, which sounds like a lot until you realize how quickly that disappears if you ever do a proper rewatch. It started in Miami and the saturated daylight of South Florida, the slice of life, Miami Metro's forensics lab, the particular texture of Dexter's domestic life as a cover story, and occasionally more than that. It produced one genuinely great season in season 4, several very good seasons in the early run, and a later period that was uneven but retained a core audience throughout. Between 2009 and the end of the original run, there were the animated web miniseries Dexter, Early Cuts, short pieces exploring earlier kills, with Hall voicing the character, available online. They're a footnote now, but a fond one. New Blood arrived in 2021, a decade after the original series' peak, and moved the story to Iron Lake, New York. 10 episodes, a different palette, colder and more isolated. Harrison returning as a teenager, played by Jack Alcott, with a quality that suggested someone carrying more than they'd learned to say. The ending was divisive. Dexter died, more or less. The franchise didn't. Original Sin followed in 2024, a prequel that explored questions about the beginning over a 10-episode first season. It produced 10 interesting episodes. Resurrection began in July 2025, moved the story to New York City, brought the ensemble back, and delivered the most commercially successful entry since the original series' early years. That's the same character, told across several different forms, surviving the end of cable television as it existed in 2006, the collapse of Netflix's exclusivity, 2 streaming platform consolidations, and 1 creative team change and reversal. Most shows don't have a story like that. Miami and New York are almost opposites as cities, and putting Dexter in New York was a real creative decision rather than a default. Miami gave the show a specific kind of visual identity. The bleached daylight, the heat that sits on everything, the water always nearby. The particular combination of glamour and seediness that South Florida manages simultaneously. The original series leaned into that palette hard. The blood spatter on white tile, the boat in the blue harbor, the bright anonymity of a city where everyone is either passing through or performing. New York is denser, older, and less forgiving of the kind of easy glamour Miami projects. It has a scale that works differently. You're not anonymous in New York because of its brightness. You're anonymous because of its sheer mass of people, because no one has time to look. The harbor is the same function, but a different feeling. The Hudson and the East River don't sparkle the way Biscayne Bay does. They're workhorse rivers, industrial, persistent. Dexter dumping bags into the harbor by the Statue of Liberty is the same action as Dexter on the Slice of Life, and also completely different. Season 1 used the city well. The scale served the story. Dexter could move through New York with a kind of operational invisibility that a smaller city wouldn't provide. The 5 boroughs as a structure gave different episodes different visual textures. Season 2, set in June, will have the city in summer, which is a different quality of light, a different density of people, a different kind of exposure. The 5 borough killer, using the city's geography as the framework of his threat, is a Season 2 specific use of the setting that ties the antagonist to the location rather than just placing him there. Sunset Pier 94. Studios as the new production home extends the show's commitment to genuinely filming in New York rather than approximating it. One of the less discussed but genuinely meaningful changes between the original series and the revival era is the aspect ratio. The original Dexter was shot in standard 16.9 and the same format as most television from the mid-2000s, and it suited Miami fine. New Blood moved to 21.9, an ultra-wide cinematic ratio more common in film than television, and it was the right call. The extra horizontal space gives New York somewhere to breathe in a way the original Miami footage never needed. Resurrection has continued with 21.9. Original Sin split the difference at 18.9, a middle point that always felt slightly indecisive to me, though I couldn't fully explain why. The visual effect of 21.9 on a standard television is that the image appears with black bars at the top and bottom. Letterboxed. On a widescreen monitor or projected properly, it fills the frame in a way that genuinely does resemble watching a film rather than television. More peripheral detail is visible. The frames feel more considered because with that much horizontal space, every element in the image has to earn its placement. Directors who are cinematically minded tend to use the extra width to compose shots that operate at a different scale from close-up heavy television. Marcos Siega has been the consistent visual authority across the revival series, and the 21.9 choice feels like his aesthetic stamp as much as anyone's. The look of Resurrection Season 1, New York at night and in winter, the harbor, the spaces Dexter moves through, had a quality that the original Miami-era episodes didn't have and wasn't trying to. It's a different kind of beautiful. Rolf Kent's original Dexter theme, that cheerful, deliberately incongruous piece of music, remains in the franchise's DNA. Whether the main title sequence of Season 2 draws on it, adapts it, or departs from it is something we won't know until October. But the sonic identity of Dexter has always been part of what makes the franchise feel continuous even across long gaps. For all the information that's been announced and confirmed, there's still a reasonably long list of things that aren't resolved yet. And that's fine. It's a show that's currently in production, the gaps are appropriate, no official premiere date has been announced. October 2026 is the target Clyde Phillips has stated publicly, but Paramount hasn't confirmed a specific date or even a firm month. That announcement will almost certainly arrive closer to the release, probably after production wraps. No trailer exists yet. The most likely window for a first trailer would be San Diego Comic-Con in July 2026, which falls a few months before the expected premiere, and is traditionally where major streaming shows debut their first footage. That's speculative based on pattern, not confirmed. No episode titles have been released for Season 2. The full shape of the Commissioner McNamara storyline, how Season 2 handles the Prater fallout at an institutional level, isn't public. Whether Charlie's role in Season 2 positions her as an ally, a neutral party, or an active threat to Dexter remains genuinely open. The question in the official character description, friend or foe, isn't rhetorical. It's not answered. What Dexter's midlife crisis actually looks like in practice, episode by episode, is also unknown. The description is a tone and a direction, not a plot. And then there are all the things that won't be announced ahead of time. The episode-level surprises, the character moments that land unexpectedly, the deaths that the show tends to be willing to commit to. Dexter has always been a franchise that's occasionally genuinely surprised people. Season 4's finale surprised people. The season 7 finale surprised people. Even the moments that don't surprise you in the moment tend to sit with you afterward. There's a lot of October still ahead of us. It's a question worth asking genuinely because the answer isn't obvious. A show about a serial killer who kills serial killers is a premise that should have exhausted itself. Dexter had 8 original seasons, an 8-year gap, and 3 additional entries: New Blood, Original Sin, Resurrection. Why does it keep working? Part of the answer is structural. The Code of Harry, Dexter only kills people who have killed innocents and escaped justice, is a moral permission structure that lets viewers engage with the character without full endorsement. It's designed to feel reasonable enough that you can follow it without feeling complicit in anything you'd refuse to follow in reality. The code is doing a lot of ethical heavy lifting on behalf of the audience, and it has been from the start. But that alone doesn't account for 20 years of continued investment. Lots of shows have clever premise structures that don't sustain interest for 2 decades. The reason Dexter persists, I think, is the interiority. The voiceover, Dexter narrating his own experience with a combination of self-awareness and selective blindness, makes him one of the most knowable, unreliable narrators in television. You understand his reasoning while simultaneously seeing around it in ways he can't. That gap between what Dexter thinks he knows about himself and what the audience can see is where all the actual drama lives. It's not in the kills. The kills are almost beside the point. It's in the maintenance of the gap. Watching someone manage a story they've told themselves for so long that questioning it has become genuinely impossible. Harrison matters for the same reason. He's not a copy of Dexter. He's the question of whether the story Dexter told himself about what he is, something inherited, something created by circumstance, something that couldn't have been otherwise, is actually true. That question has enough longevity to carry several more seasons. The show keeps working because it keeps asking in various ways whether the person at the center of it is a monster who adapted or a person who made choices. The franchise appears constitutionally incapable of answering that question, which is probably why it's still going. The renewal Instagram post getting over 10 million views is a number worth considering for a moment. That's not a generalized platform metric. That's 10 million people specifically engaging with the announcement that this show is coming back. For a franchise that started as a cable drama in 2006 and has navigated every shift in how television is made and consumed since then, that level of engaged interest is not a given. The fan community around Dexter has a particular quality. It tends to be knowledgeable and specific. People who can tell you exactly which episode Log Where To first connects the Bay Harbor Butcher case to Dexter, who have opinions about seasons 5 and 6 that are more nuanced than bad, who remember the Dexter Early Cuts web miniseries exist. That's the kind of audience that generates real discourse rather than just general noise. The Brian Cox announcement generated its own specific wave of debate, some of it about whether revealing the New York Ripper's actor identity removed a layer of mystery the show had been sustaining. That's a legitimate creative argument, and the fact that fans are having it rather than simply celebrating suggests an audience that's thinking carefully about the show's choices rather than just consuming them. The casting reveal process for Season 2 has been notably different from Season 1. Season 1's major castings, Peter Dinklage, Uma Thurman, and others, were announced in the period before filming, and the show maintained some ambiguity about character details even as names were released. Season 2 has been similar. Names first, details follow, certain specifics stay protected. What people seem most consistently excited about is Quinn's return as a series regular and Uma Thurman's continued presence. Both of those represent continuity in different ways. Quinn as a thread back to the original series, Thurman as evidence that Resurrection is building a world that persists across seasons rather than resetting. There's a particular comfort late in a video like this in going back through everything that's been confirmed and placing it in a single, slow list. Not as urgency, not as a recap you need to memorize, just as a kind of inventory. Here's what we know. Dexter, Resurrection Season 2 was officially renewed by Paramount Plus and Showtime on October 8, 2025. The announcement came 5 weeks after the Season 1 finale and was confirmed with a public Instagram post that drew significant attention. It was accompanied quietly by the news that Original Sin would not continue. The writer's room opened in October 2025. Development through the end of 2025 and into early 2026 shaped the season. Production began on April 13, 2026. Marcos Siega posted the clapboard. The M99 syringe appeared in the carousel. A production video of Michael C. Hall and James Remar on set confirmed the 2 central performances were underway. Filming is taking place in New York City at the brand new Sunset Pier 94 Studios, the first production to use that facility, and on locations across the city. The season will consist of 10 episodes. Showrunner is Clyde Phillips. Director and executive producer is Marcos Siega. Scott Reynolds is returning as a core writer. The expected premiere is October 2026, which would coincide with the 20th anniversary of the original Dexter pilot. No official date has been announced. No trailer exists yet. The confirmed returning cast as of the time of writing includes Michael C. Hall as Dexter Morgan, Jack Alcott as Harrison Morgan, James Remar as Harry Morgan, Uma Thurman as Charlie Brown, returning and breaking the franchise's standard practice of resolving villains permanently, Kadia Saraf as Detective Claudette Wallace, Dominic Fumusa as Detective Melvin Oliva, and Tare Guma Mbaho Mwine as Blessing Kamara. Desmond Harrington as J.O.E. Quinn, upgraded to series regular. The confirmed new cast additions include Brian Cox as Don Frampt, also known as the New York Ripper, an Emmy-winning actor best known recently for Succession, here playing a retired serial killer who taunts the survivors of his historical spree. Dan Stevens as Owen Stark, also known as the Five-Borough Killer, an active killer who calls in threats against civilians across New York's 5 boroughs and follows through on them. Bokeem Woodbine as Captain Mixon, a homicide captain at the NYPD's 27th Precinct, described as a bulldog. Nona Parker Johnson as Fiona Mixon, the captain's daughter training in homicide, and Harrison's Season 2 love interest. The official Season 2 description: Dexter Morgan caught between 2 killers, one notorious and one terrorizing New York in ways no one ever anticipated, all while battling his greatest enemy yet, a midlife crisis. The in-universe timeline: Season 2 takes place in June 2026, a 4-year jump from Season 1's February-March 2022 setting. It's the largest time gap between consecutive seasons in the franchise's history. The broader plan: 3 seasons with awareness of where the story ends. No official Season 3 renewal yet, but the creative team has described knowing the outline and having early casting ideas. That's the picture as it stands. Everything known, everything confirmed, everything that makes October feel like it means something this year. Since we've spent considerable time on Brian Cox and Dan Stevens as the Season 2 antagonists, it's worth thinking for a moment about what actually makes the franchise's villains work. Because the track record is mixed in interesting ways. The best ones, Trinity, Miguel Prado, Lila to a lesser extent, work because they mirror something in Dexter rather than just opposing him. Trinity was the vision of what Dexter could become if he'd allowed his darker nature to take over his domestic life entirely. Arthur Mitchell had a wife and children and a church and a community, and he was also a serial killer who had developed his own system, his own code, his own compartmentalizations. Dexter recognized something in him before he fully understood what he was recognizing. That's why Season 4 hit so hard. It wasn't just that Trinity was violent, it was that Dexter could see himself in the architecture of the man's life. And the ending of the season, Rita's death, was the show collapsing that vision of the parallel life. Miguel Prado in Season 3 worked similarly. He was someone Dexter genuinely wanted to be friends with, genuinely wanted to let in, and the season's tragedy was in discovering that the friendship was conditional on Dexter enabling things he couldn't enable. The moral contamination ran both ways. The ones that didn't land as well tended to be pure opposites, villains who were simply malevolent without reflecting anything back at the protagonist. Brian Cox as Don Frampt, a retired killer who taunts survivors, has the potential to mirror Dexter's own relationship with his past. Dexter is also, in a sense, someone whose crimes are historical and who has been living with their weight for a long time. The parallel isn't comfortable to draw, but the show has never flinched from that kind of uncomfortable reflection. Dan Stevens as the Five-Borough Killer is a more immediate, chaotic force. The mirror there is probably less thematic and more operational. Both types are useful. The combination, held well, can sustain a full season. October is a few months away. If this video has done anything, it's probably made you want to spend some time with Dexter again before the new season arrives. So here's a brief, lazy guide to what's worth watching. Season 1 of the original series holds up remarkably well. The ice truck killer mystery has a quality the later seasons occasionally lost. It's genuinely suspenseful in a way that doesn't require you to already be invested in Dexter's world. It establishes the rhythms of the show with a confidence that feels earned rather than assumed. Season 4 is the consensus peak. The Tranquillity killer arc is, by a significant margin, the best sustained run of episodes the franchise has produced. John Lithgow's performance is the obvious attraction, but what makes it work is the structural and emotional intelligence of how the season builds. It ends badly in the best possible way. Watching it again, knowing what's coming, is a different experience from watching it cold, and arguably a more interesting one. Dexter. New Blood rewards a rewatch because it's a more coherent piece of work than it sometimes got credit for in the initial conversation. The ending remains divisive, but the season itself, the Iron Lake setting, the Harrison storyline, the rhythm of a small town being slowly revealed, is genuinely good television. Season 1 of Resurrection is the most relevant thing to watch before October. It's 10 episodes, it moves well, and it establishes everything that Season 2 is building on. The Prater and Charlie dynamic, the Bautista return, Harrison's arc, the New York Ripper setup, all of it is there. And knowing it in detail makes every announcement about Season 2 sit differently. Everything is on Paramount Plus with Showtime. That's convenient, even if the subscription tier is slightly annoying. There's something that hasn't been discussed in enough depth yet, and it's been sitting in the background of several of these sections. What does Angel Batistu's death actually mean for the world of Season 2? Batistu was, across the original series and into Resurrection, the franchise's moral center in a way that no other character quite was. Not its conscience, that role gets passed around, but its heart. He was the person who genuinely cared about the people around him, who took the job of police work seriously without ever losing his humanity inside it, who was one of the few characters Dexter genuinely liked rather than simply tolerated or used. Their friendship, such as it was as close as Dexter ever got to something uncalculated. His death in the Season 1 finale was the moment the season committed to being genuinely dark rather than just dark adjacent. Prater shot him in front of Dexter and the show didn't soften it. Dexter covered him with a cloth, said the words, and left. Now Quinn is coming back as a series regular. Quinn and Batistu were colleagues for years, friends in the complicated way cops who've been through difficult situations together become friends. Quinn doesn't know that Batistu is dead yet, presumably. Or if the news has reached Miami, and presumably it has eventually through whatever channels, he doesn't know the full version of what happened. He knows Dexter was there. He presumably knows something about Prater. He knows Batistu was in New York. What he does with that knowledge and what version of Batistu's death becomes the official story is one of the more interesting procedural questions hanging over Season 2. Batistu's absence is going to be felt as a shape. The show knows how to do that. It did it with Rita, it did it with Dokes. The people who leave tend to define the spaces they leave behind. Stepping all the way back and looking at Season 2 as a single gestalt thing before it exists, before any of it has aired, just as an idea assembled from everything we've discussed tonight. What does it look like? It looks like a season with ambition at its center. Not the technical ambition of doing something formally clever with structure or format, but the character ambition of asking a harder question about Dexter Morgan than Season 1 had to ask. Season 1 was, in the best possible way, the franchise finding its footing in a new city with a new setup. It did its job. It re-established the pleasures of the show. It gave the ensemble something interesting to do. It ended with an exit that opened rather than closed. Season 2 seems to want to go further. The dual villain structure is more complex than anything Season 1 managed. Brian Cox brings a different weight to his antagonist role than Peter Dinklage did. Not better or worse, just different in kind. Dinklage's Prater was exuberant and operatic. Cox's Frampt, a retired killer who taunts from a distance, sounds quieter and colder and probably more unsettling for that. Dan Stevens as the five-borough killer adds a chaotic, immediate energy that keeps the season from becoming too static. Quinn coming back as a series regular is the choice that probably signals the most about Season 2's intentions. That's not a nostalgic casting decision. That's a choice to bring back the one character from the original series who has spent the most time being suspicious of Dexter. In a season where Dexter is surrounded by new deaths he can't easily explain, that's pressure. And then there's the midlife crisis, the one that the official description called Dexter's greatest enemy yet, which, knowing what his other enemies have been, suggests the writers are serious about the interiority this time. October, whenever exactly it arrives, is going to be worth staying awake for, at least partially. Right, we've been at this for a while, and if you're still awake, genuinely, I'm slightly impressed this was a lot of Dexter, then hopefully it's been a comfortable kind of while. The kind of time that passes easily. The thing about waiting for a season of television is that it occupies a specific kind of anticipatory space. Not the anxious kind of waiting where the gap is something to be got through, but the slower kind where the existence of the thing you're waiting for is itself pleasant company. You know it's coming, you know broadly what it's bringing with it. Brian Cox as a retired serial killer who taunts survivors, Dan Stevens with a threat structured around a city's geography, Joe E. Quinn back in the room, Uma Thurman making choices that the show won't tell us about yet, and Dexter Morgan in New York in June, apparently having a midlife crisis in between doing what he's always done. That's a lot of good television to have ahead of you. If you want to spend some time with the franchise between now and October, Season 1 of Resurrection is the obvious starting point. It's on Paramount Plus with Showtime, it's 10 episodes, it moves well. After that, if you have the appetite, Season 4 of the original series is the one that tends to stay with people. And Season 1 of the original series, if you've never been, is worth the introduction. There are probably other videos on this channel that might keep you company tonight if you're not quite ready to be fully asleep yet. And I'm working on a few more things that should be ready before October, including some that go deeper into the franchise's history for anyone who wants more context before the new season lands. But for now, that's enough. This has been a long, slow walk through everything we know about Dexter, Resurrection Season 2, and I hope it served its purpose, either as something genuinely useful to fall asleep to or as a comfortable way to spend a late evening with information you didn't need urgently but found pleasant to have. 20 Years of Dexter, October 2026, Brian Cox, sleep well. This wasn't in the original plan for this video, but there's one thing that's been sitting at the back of my mind throughout all of this, and it feels worth saying before we're completely done. The Code of Harry. Dexter's moral framework, the rule set that Harry Morgan constructed to give his son's compulsions a direction rather than letting them run unchecked, has always been the thing the show is really arguing about. Not the kills, not the procedural investigation, not even the family drama in the end. The code, whether it holds, whether it should hold, whether someone can build an ethical life on a foundation that was always a rationalization dressed as a philosophy. In the original series, the code was largely taken as given. It was the premise. Viewers accepted it because the show asked them to. Harry was wise, the code was the code, and Dexter, following it, was the structure that made the violence feel navigable. New blood started pulling at it. It ended with the argument that the code couldn't be transmitted to a second generation. That what worked as a structure for Dexter specifically, shaped by Harry specifically, in Miami specifically, was not something Harrison could inherit without inheriting everything else that came with it. Harrison shooting Dexter was, among other things, a rejection of the code as a framework for living. And now Season 2 is arriving with Dexter in New York, operating from Pratter's files, and having what the official description calls a midlife crisis. The midlife crisis isn't just about age or restlessness, it's probably at some level about the code, about whether the structure Harry built still makes sense, about whether Dexter in his late 50s can honestly tell himself that the architecture of justification he's been living inside for 30 plus years is actually what he's always told himself it is. Harry's ghost is back. Quinn is back. The ghost of everything Dexter has been is everywhere in Season 2 by design. That's the season I'm looking forward to watching. There's a version of this that I could make anxious. The wait for Season 2, the uncertainty about the exact premiere date, the trailers that don't exist yet, the questions that won't be answered until October. Any of that could be framed as lack rather than abundance. But the quieter version of it is this. Right now, somewhere in New York City, the second season of Dexter, Resurrection, is being made. The cameras are rolling. Michael C. Hall is on a set that smells of whatever sets smell like. Coffee, cables, the particular stillness of a space that's been dressed to look like somewhere else. Marco Siega is lining up shots. Brian Cox is in a room somewhere in the building, probably. And in October, most of what we've talked about tonight will become scenes. The retired killer and his survivors. The 5 borough killer making his calls. Dexter's midlife reckoning with whatever version of himself he's arrived at. Quinn asking questions, Harry watching, Harrison trying still to figure out whether the quiet road is actually available to him or whether it was always an optimistic fiction. That's a lot to look forward to. And in the meantime, there's a slow walk through what's been announced, laid out at the kind of pace that's good for late evenings. Nothing urgent. Nothing that needed your full attention. It'll still be there in the morning, and so will October.